Have you ever visited a psychic? Well, I doubt the story ended quite like this one. Before we get into it, this is Honey Horror. All of these stories are original, and I would greatly appreciate it if you would like, share, subscribe, and leave your own personal spook rating. If not, just comment below and let me know what you think of the stories. Now let's get into it. I had just moved into a big city from a little town. There was so much to explore and learn. I noticed that spirituality was very popular to the locals, with people often wearing crystal necklaces, talking about what the moon was doing, and discussing astrology. I was incredibly intrigued by it all, as all the people in my tiny town never really showed an interest in any of it. As I began making friends and going out more, I learned a little bit more each day. One day, while out to lunch with my friend, she started talking about tarot readings. Now, this was something I hadn't heard of just yet, and I leaned in with intrigue. She discussed how a reader she went to foretold her future with her current partner and helped her get clarity on her boss's annoying behavior. I asked how she got a tarot reading, and she looked at me dumbfounded, asking if I had ever had one. I blushed and said no, and explained that things like that weren't very popular in my hometown. She pulls out her phone and shows me the tarot reader's social media. She explained that I could set up an appointment that way. I pull up my phone and follow the page. The week goes on and I don't think much of it. After a long work week, I plop down on the couch and get ready to relax. The conversation I had with my friend pops into my head once more, and I pull up the social media page for the reader. I messaged to see when they would be available, assuming it would be some time before I could get an appointment. The reader responds immediately and asks if I can come in the next day around 7 p.m. I'm shocked and mention that the hour is rather late. The reader begins telling me that she feels it's urgent for me to come see her, and not knowing what else to do or think, I agree. The next day I head to the location that the reader shared and enter a very cozy room with incense and calming music humming in the background. The reader steps out from behind a beaded curtain, surprised. She mentions that she didn't hear me come in, and moves over to the couch asking me to have a seat. I do, still looking at her wide-eyed. She stares back at me and states that there's no reason to be nervous. She just felt a strong pull from my energy and felt it important to go ahead and meet with me. She begins shuffling the cards and spreads 2 to 3 out in front of me. At first, she's silently tapping one of the cards. Then, she begins to ask if anyone in my family or friend circle had passed, to which I said no. She goes on to explain that there was a very strong energy with me, but that it wasn't pleasant. As soon as she says this, the candle on her table begins flickering and crackling. Then, out of nowhere, the glass on the candle pops and cracks straight down the middle. She stands up and grabs a cloth to clean up the wax. As she does, one of the cards flies off the table. I turn to look at her in disbelief, but her back was turned. She sits back down and apologizes and begins looking around for the card. She glances around the table and picks it up off the floor. She mentions that she must have knocked it off. At this point, I'm trying to figure out if this is all a clever hoax or if I just witnessed something paranormal. The reader continues shuffling the cards, but in the midst of shuffling, she stops. Her head is bowed down towards the table, and she remains very still for several seconds. I mutter softly, scared to say anything at all, asking if she's okay. Her head snaps up, and she looks at me with dilated pupils. Her once bright blue eyes now look nearly black. Her mouth drops open and remains that way for what feels like forever. I then hear a soft, whistling sound from behind the beaded curtain. I turn to look quickly, but there's nothing there. I turn my gaze back to the reader, and her head is dropped back down to the cards. She slowly begins shuffling again. I am terrified, but also still struggling with whether or not this is all just a show she's putting on. The reader shuffles faster and faster and faster. Then she stops abruptly and looks up at me and begins to speak slowly and quietly. It's following you. It watches you. It waits for you to cry into worry. It feeds on your misfortune. It will never stop. I stare in horror at the woman, and within seconds she transforms right back into the reader I originally met, shuffling the cards gingerly. She begins to lay them out, describing what they mean, explaining how I'm going to do well in my current job, as if everything that just happened was all part of my imagination. I get up abruptly and offer her cash payment. I stumble over my words, explaining how I have an appointment tomorrow morning that I forgot about and how I should be heading back home. She looks confused, but accepts the cash and lets me know I can come back anytime. I leave feeling very shaken up and think about calling my friend that recommended her. I pull out my phone and see that somehow it was already 12 p.m. I'm so confused, as it seems I had only been in there for about 30 minutes. I get in my car and speed off back to my apartment. All the while, the gnawing sense of dread creeps over me. By the time I get to my apartment building, I run up the 2 flights of stairs and lock the door behind me as I rush in. Over the next few weeks, everything that could go wrong did. My apartment building burned down. I lost my job and totaled my car on the way to an interview for a new one. I kept pushing despite the problems, grateful that I was okay, and so were all the people caught in these situations. Along the way, I had developed some strange stress response due to all of it, in which I would randomly black out and begin dreaming or something about this dark figure following me down a long dirt path in the forest. Every time this happened, the feeling of fear was so strong that I thought I might actually experience a heart attack. But right before the figure would reach out to grab me, I would wake up. My parents helped me get to a therapist who explained that ongoing sessions would help me process everything that had happened. One night, while walking back home from a local diner I'd began working at, I stepped off of the curb and I must have lost my balance. I don't recall exactly what happened, but it was explained to me by my parents when I woke up in the hospital with a broken leg and a concussion. After they checked on me and I assured them that I was fine for the night, they decided to leave. I began drifting off to sleep, but as I did, I heard a whistling sound. And I look over to the curtain separating me from the person in the bed next to me. The curtain suddenly jerks back, and a woman with dark, black eyes stares at me, and she begins saying in a bone-chilling whisper, "I've been following you. I've been watching you. I wait for you to cry and to worry. I feed on your misfortune. I will never stop." What do we think of that spooky story? Thank you so much for listening to Honey Horror. I hope you liked it, and if you did, feel free to like, share, and subscribe, of course. Please feel free to leave a comment below, letting me know what you think. Also, always consider sharing your own stories for feature here. Have a spooky day.